10:20 in the morning, June 4th, 1942. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey is lost. His fuel gauge reads almost empty. His 37 dive bombers have been searching the Pacific for over an hour, and the Japanese fleet that should be here is nowhere. This is it. The last chance to stop Japan's advance, and he can't find the target. Then, 20,000 feet below, he spots something. A single destroyer, racing north, leaving a white wake across the blue water. He makes a split-second decision. Follow it. 4 minutes later, he sees them. 4 massive Japanese carriers, their decks crammed with aircraft being fueled and armed. Bombs and torpedoes scattered everywhere. The crews are looking the wrong way. In 5 minutes, 3 of these carriers will be blazing wrecks. But to understand how these American pilots ended up here, we have to go back to where this impossible day began. The early morning sun glints off the Pacific as Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo surveys his fleet from the bridge of the Akagi, his flagship. Around him steam 3 more massive carriers, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. These ships delivered the crushing blow to Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier. Together, they represent the most powerful carrier strike force ever assembled, with over 250 aircraft, thousands of elite pilots, and an unbroken record of victory. Their target is Midway Atoll, a tiny speck of coral and sand 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii. Take Midway, and Hawaii is exposed. Take Hawaii, and the American West Coast is within striking range. Nagumo's battle plan is straightforward. His carriers will launch a massive airstrike to soften up Midway's defenses, then land invasion forces to capture the atoll. The Americans, if they respond with their remaining carriers, will sail straight into a trap. The Japanese combined fleet waits over the horizon to finish them off. It's a plan designed by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto himself, the architect of Pearl Harbor. But there's something Nagumo doesn't know, something that will turn his plan into disaster. Far to the northeast, 3 American carriers are already in position. Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown sit in the empty ocean, exactly where American intelligence predicted the Japanese would pass. These 3 carriers represent everything the United States Navy has left in the Pacific. It's all or nothing. Admiral Chester Nimitz has made the most important gamble of his life. While the Japanese believe they're executing a surprise attack, the Americans are waiting. The hunters have become the hunted, but the odds are against them. The Japanese have more carriers, more planes, more experienced pilots. 400 miles of ocean separate the 2 fleets. In a few hours, the course of the war will be decided. But first, a lot of brave men are going to die. To understand how America pulled off this impossible ambush, you have to go back 6 months to Pearl Harbor's smoldering wreckage. Admiral Yamamoto had executed the perfect surprise attack, but he had made one critical miscalculation. He hadn't destroyed America's aircraft carriers, and he had awakened a sleeping giant with a genius codebreaker who was about to set a trap for the world's most powerful navy. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was not a typical warlord. He had studied at Harvard, traveled across America, and understood its industrial might. When Japan's military leaders pushed for war, Yamamoto warned them they were making a mistake. His plan for Pearl Harbor was brilliant and devastating, but incomplete. The American carriers were at sea during the attack, and Yamamoto knew they would come for revenge. His solution was Midway. Force the Americans into a decisive battle, destroy their remaining carriers, and break their will to fight. It was logical, strategic, and doomed from the start. Because while Yamamoto was planning his trap, a disheveled naval commander named Joseph Rochefort was working in a basement in Pearl Harbor, listening to everything. Station Hypo was America's most secret weapon. Rochefort and his codebreakers had been working around the clock for months, piecing together fragments of intercepted Japanese naval communications. The Japanese used a code they believed was unbreakable. It wasn't. By late May 1942, Rochefort's team had cracked enough to know something big was coming. The intercepts mentioned an objective designated AF and a massive operation planned for early June. But where was AF? Rochefort needed proof. So he devised a trap. He had Midway send out a fake radio message in plain English, claiming their water distillation plant had broken down. Within days, Japanese intelligence intercepted and relayed the message, noting that AF was short on fresh water. AF was Midway, and in 36 hours, this basement operation would catch Japan's carriers off guard. Admiral Nimitz, trusting Rochefort's analysis despite skepticism from Washington, made his decision. He would position his carriers northeast of Midway, using the atoll as bait. The Japanese, expecting surprise, would sail straight into an ambush. It required perfect timing and luck. And knowing the trap is coming doesn't mean you can survive it. The Yorktown's rapid repair was nothing short of miraculous. Damaged at Coral Sea with a massive hole in her flight deck, she limped into Pearl Harbor on May 27th. Navy engineers estimated 3 months of repairs. Nimitz gave them 3 days. Welders worked around the clock. 1,400 workers swarmed the ship, and on May 30th, Yorktown sailed out to join the ambush. She wasn't fully repaired, but she could launch planes, and that was all that mattered. On June 2nd, the American carriers reached their ambush position northeast of Midway. They waited. The Japanese fleet steamed eastward, unaware they were sailing into a trap. Yamamoto's plan depended on surprise. He had no idea his codes were broken. The irony was perfect. Japan planned a surprise attack. America was waiting. 3 American carriers versus 4 Japanese. The math didn't look good. If you're enjoying this story of how a handful of pilots changed the course of history, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. We bring you the most incredible true stories from history, the battles and moments that shaped our world. Drop a comment below telling us what historical battle you want to hear about next. Now, let's get back to Midway, where the morning of June 4th is about to become the bloodiest few hours in naval aviation history. Dawn breaks on June 4th, and the Japanese launch their first strike against Midway, 108 aircraft screaming toward the tiny atoll. But as their bombers disappear over the horizon, Nagumo makes a decision that will haunt him forever. He orders his reserve planes, armed with torpedoes for attacking ships, to be rearmed with bombs for a second strike on Midway. On the hangar decks below, his crew frantically begins switching weapons, leaving torpedoes and bombs lying everywhere. Nagumo doesn't know it yet, but he just made the worst decision of his life. 4:30 in the morning, the Japanese carriers turn into the wind and launch their strike. Dive bombers, level bombers, and Zero fighters roar off the decks toward Midway, 150 miles away. Behind them, below decks, crews prepare a second wave armed with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs designed to destroy ships. They're Nagumo's insurance policy in case American carriers appear. On Midway, radar picks up the incoming strike at 5:30. Air raid sirens wail. Every plane that can fly takes off. The Marines man their anti-aircraft guns and brace for impact. The Japanese strike hits at 6:30. It's brutal and efficient. Zeros shred the outmatched American fighters. Bombers pound the installations. But the Americans fight back harder than expected. Anti-aircraft fire is heavy. The Japanese lose several planes. And critically, the strike commander radios back. Midway needs a second strike. The defenses aren't fully destroyed. This is where Nagumo's plan begins to unravel. At 7 o'clock, Nagumo makes his decision. Order the reserve planes to swap their torpedoes for land bombs. Launch a second wave against Midway. No American carriers have been spotted. Why keep anti-ship weapons ready for an enemy that isn't there? Below decks, chaos erupts. Crews scramble to unload heavy torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs, replacing them with high-explosive bombs for land targets. Torpedoes are stacked on the hangar decks. Bombs sit in racks. Fuel lines run across the floor. Everything is exposed. Then, at 7:28, everything changes. A scout plane from one of the cruisers, launched late due to equipment problems, radios its report. 10 ships sighted, bearing 10 degrees, distance 240 miles. American ships. Ships could mean cruisers, destroyers, but they could also mean carriers. Nagumo orders the scout to determine ship types. 20 agonizing minutes pass. Then the answer comes. The enemy is accompanied by what appears to be a carrier. A carrier. The surprise is gone, and Nagumo's reserve aircraft are being rearmed with the wrong weapons. He has a terrible choice. Launch immediately with planes armed for land attack, or wait to rearm them for ship attack. His first strike against Midway is returning, low on fuel. They need to land. His decks are cluttered. He makes the fateful call. Recover the Midway strike force first. Rearm the reserve planes properly. Then launch everything in one massive strike. It's the textbook decision. It's also the decision that will destroy his fleet. While Nagumo's carriers recover aircraft and frantically rearm others, the American carriers launch their strike. Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown turn into the wind. One by one, dive bombers and torpedo bombers thunder off the decks. It's 8 o'clock. The distance to the Japanese fleet is about 175 miles. The American pilots know they're flying to the edge of their fuel range. Many won't make it back, but they're going anyway. The first to find the Japanese fleet are the torpedo bombers, and they're going to pay a terrible price. The first American torpedo squadron arrives. 15 Devastator torpedo bombers, slow, obsolete, and hopelessly outmatched. Their commander leads them straight in at wave-top height. As the attack begins, the sky explodes with anti-aircraft fire. Japanese Zero fighters, circling at low altitude, pounce like wolves. What happens next is slaughter. The Zeros tear through the Devastators. One by one, they're shot down. Planes explode. Others cartwheel into the ocean. Within minutes, 14 of 15 aircraft are destroyed. Only one man survives, Ensign George Gay, floating in the water, watching the battle unfold. But the sacrifice is not in vain. The Zeros and anti-aircraft guns are now focused entirely at sea level. The sky above is empty, and that's exactly where death is coming from. Which brings us back to where we started. 10:20 in the morning. McCluskey is lost, his dive bombers running low on fuel. His 37 aircraft represent America's last chance. If he doesn't find the carriers, the battle is over. Then, far below, he spots a single Japanese destroyer racing north. He makes a split-second decision. Follow it. McCluskey has made a navigation error. He flew too far southwest, missing the Japanese fleet by miles. With fuel running critically low, he was turning back, but then he saw it. The wake of a destroyer racing to rejoin the fleet. McCluskey turned to follow, and minutes later, there they were, the 4 carriers, steaming in formation, and on their decks, complete chaos. Aircraft crammed everywhere, being fueled and armed. Fuel lines across the decks. Bombs and torpedoes in the open. The carriers are at their most vulnerable moment, and they have no idea death is diving from above. At the same instant, another American squadron arrives from a different direction. 17 dive bombers from Yorktown appear from the southwest. By pure chance, 2 separate squadrons have arrived at exactly the same moment, and the Japanese are looking the wrong way. McCluskey picks his target, Kaga, her deck jammed with aircraft. He banks his dauntless dive bomber into a steep turn and rolls into his attack. Behind him, his squadron follows. The Yorktown squadron commander selects Soryu and begins his dive. What happens next takes 5 minutes and changes history. The dive bombers drop from 20,000 feet in near vertical dives, screaming toward their targets at over 200 miles per hour. The first Japanese lookouts spot them and scream warnings, but it's too late. The Zeros are all at sea level. The anti-aircraft guns are pointed at the ocean. 10:22, McCluskey's bombers roll in. The first bomb hits Akagi's flight deck, punching through and detonating in the hangar below, igniting aircraft being refueled. 10:24, a second bomb hits Akagi near the amidships elevator. Her hangar deck erupts. Fully fueled and armed aircraft explode in chain reactions. Torpedoes cook off. Bombs detonate. Within seconds, the flagship is a blazing inferno. 10:25. Kaga takes 4 hits in rapid succession, one near the bridge. Another penetrates the flight deck and ignites the packed hangar. A third hits the forward elevator. The fourth strikes aft. Sailors leap into the ocean. 10:27. Soryu takes 3 bombs in 3 minutes. First the flight deck, then amidships, then the hangar. Massive explosions tear her apart. 10:29. 3 Japanese carriers are burning wrecks. 5 minutes. 5 minutes of American dive bombing has turned the entire battle upside down. Nagumo, evacuating the flaming wreck of Akagi, can only stare in horror. George Gay, still floating in the water, watches the entire thing. He sees the dive bombers roll in. He sees the explosions. He sees the carriers burn. He's a front-row witness to the most important 5 minutes of the Pacific War. 3 carriers burning, 1,000 Japanese sailors in the water. But the battle isn't over. 1 Japanese carrier remains. Hiryu, positioned farther north, has escaped, and her commander is preparing his revenge. By noon, 3 of Japan's 4 carriers are blazing hulks. The 4th carrier, Hiryu, launches a revenge strike that cripples Yorktown. The Japanese think they've evened the score. They have no idea that American dive bombers are already hunting them down for one final strike. Hiryu's commander doesn't hesitate when he learns the other carriers are destroyed. Launch everything. Hiryu sends 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters toward the American fleet. It's a fraction of what the Japanese started with, but it's all they have left. The strike finds Yorktown at noon. Japanese dive bombers push through intense anti-aircraft fire and score 3 direct hits. Bombs punch through Yorktown's damaged flight deck. Fires break out. The carrier loses power and slows to a halt. An hour later, Hiryu launches a second strike. 10 torpedo bombers attack the crippled Yorktown. 2 torpedoes slam into her port side, tearing open her hull. She lists heavily. Her captain orders abandon ship. On Hiryu, there's brief jubilation. They think they've sunk an American carrier, but they don't know that Enterprise and Hornet are still out there hunting. At 4:30, American scout planes locate Hiryu. The American task force commander launches every dive bomber he has left. 24 aircraft from Enterprise race toward the last Japanese carrier. They find Hiryu at 5 o'clock, steaming at high speed. Her deck is empty, her strike aircraft still returning. Once again, the Americans catch a Japanese carrier at her most vulnerable moment. 4 bombs hit Hiryu in rapid succession. 1 forward of the bridge, another near the forward elevator, a third amidships, the 4th aft. Hiryu's hangar deck becomes an inferno. Flames roar hundreds of feet into the air. By 6 o'clock, all 4 Japanese carriers are doomed. Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu are drifting, burning hulks, abandoned by their crews. Hiryu is engulfed in flames. The Japanese admiral who commanded the carrier division and Hiryu's captain refuse to evacuate. They choose to go down with their ship. Through the night, the carriers burn. Japanese destroyers rescue survivors from the oil-slicked water. At dawn on June 5th, Japanese destroyers torpedo the wrecks to send them to the bottom. The Americans haven't escaped unscathed. Yorktown remains afloat, but helpless, under tow. On June 6th, a Japanese submarine finds her. 2 torpedoes slam into Yorktown and a destroyer alongside her. The destroyer breaks in half and sinks. Yorktown finally succumbs. She rolls over and sinks on June 7th. The human cost is staggering. Japan loses 3,057 men, 4 fleet carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, 248 aircraft, and perhaps most devastatingly, hundreds of veteran pilots whose experience cannot be replaced. America loses 307 men, 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, 150 aircraft. It's a terrible price, but compared to what could have been, it's a miracle. Japan's offensive capability in the Pacific is broken. They will never again threaten Hawaii or the American West Coast. Midway marks the turning point. Everything that follows, the island-hopping campaigns, the reconquest of the Philippines, the eventual defeat of Japan, all becomes possible because of those 5 minutes on June 4th. Admiral Yamamoto cancels the Midway invasion and orders a retreat. The carriers he lost cannot be quickly replaced. Japan's industrial capacity is a fraction of America's. The Battle of Midway proves that wars are not won by surprise attacks alone, but by intelligence, courage, and luck. The Americans cracked the code. The torpedo bomber crews drew the Japanese defenses down to sea level. McCluskey got lost, then followed a destroyer's wake and found the carriers at the perfect moment. 2 dive bomber squadrons arrived simultaneously by pure chance, and the Japanese had their bombs and torpedoes lying exposed at the worst possible moment. Share this video with anyone who loves incredible true stories. Sometimes history turns on a single moment, and this was one of them. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes of American dive bombers screaming from the sky, and Japan's dream of empire turned to smoke and ash. The Pacific War would rage for 3 more years. But on June 4th, 1942, above the blue waters near Midway, the tide turned. Sometimes history comes down to timing, to courage, to men making impossible choices. And sometimes it comes down to a lost navigator following a destroyer's wake and finding exactly what he was looking for. If these stories inspire you, subscribe to our channel. We bring you the battles that changed history. Drop a comment and tell us what historical moment you think we should cover next. The past is full of incredible stories. Let's explore them together.